Asked me to come up Monday and do a couple weeks. But I think I'll wait. We're going to go to Europe for a couple weeks vacation. But I could look forward to going back there.
Anytime, folks, you're on tape.
Okay. You're a really multi-talented man. You write, direct, and act. By the way, how did it happen that you were acting in this picture? Is it true that you were just filling in for the guy they were looking for? And
Yes, sort of. I'd sort of given up on myself as an actor because people kept channeling me into writing. If you can do something well, no one wants to see you do anything different. So I would tell people I was an actor and that I'd acted a lot, which I had at Second City. And they never took me seriously as an actor. I think there's a shortage of comedy writers and directors who can do it effectively. So no one had time for me, for my ambitions as an actor. But I knew it was more fun. And I knew that the actors get all the good strokes after the movie is finally released. So I'd harbored that dream of being discovered for a long time. And Ivan had produced a show. I met Ivan in Toronto, as a matter of fact. We were playing the El Macambo, doing a show for the National Lampoon. It was Gilda Radner and John Belushi, and Bill was in the show, and Bill's brother Brian, Joe Flaherty. And Gilda introduced us to Ivan, and 6 weeks later, Ivan was producing us in New York. So when this part was vacant, he sort of resurrected my acting career as far as movies go.
how did you like yourself in it?
Well, it's confusing. Everyone has a lot of vanity, and you realize that that bad angle you see where you don't look so good is going to be seen forever and ever. That my stomach will never go away in some of those shots. We're pretty seedy-looking soldiers, I think.
I thought you had a lot of that old hackneyed word, charisma.
Thank you.
You came across very well, and I wonder now if you will sort of continue to pursue an acting career. Will that take precedence over? Well, you directed Caddyshack, and of course you co-scripted this. Now, what direction will you take?
I think looking for work as an actor has to be the worst kind of career.
All the rejections, you mean?
Yeah, it's constant, and it gets worse. As you get closer to getting a part, it's down to those final few people. You've read the part 6 times for every producer, every studio executive, and then not to get it would be, I don't think I have the strength to endure it. If someone calls me and says they definitely have a part for me and I've got the part, then I would for sure do it again. But I can't see using my time in a fruitless search for work.
I don't know that it would be fruitless, but I can sympathize with actors who must face over and over and over that crucial moment of acceptance or rejection. Must be very hard to live with that.
Oh yeah. The great thing about writing is all you need is pencil and paper, and you can create any world you want to or any character you want to, and there's no one to tell you no.
It's interesting that you work with a lot of Canadians. In fact, I think some people think you are a Canadian.
Yeah.
And you seem to have what I termed, or Ivan Reitman terms it as not even a Canadian sense of humor, a Toronto sense of humor. Is there such a thing as a Toronto or Canadian sense of humor?
Not that I found. The Canadians like to laugh at their own foibles, I think. I think they understand that competition with the United States. They think it's funny. They feel like maybe they're the second country on the continent, and that everything in America is more sophisticated or something. And Second City has always succeeded with a lot of comedy about the provincialism of Canada. Great. For some reason, they think that people from Newfoundland are funny, right? I mean, it's a standing joke. And Canada has its own, I guess, particular east-west split that Eastern Canada is the poor cousin to Western Canada. Is that the attitude? And lots of jokes about moose and elk and stuff.
But on the whole, you'd think that humor, basic humor, is pretty universal.
I think so. I think what it comes down to in Canada is like anywhere else. There are a lot of sophisticated people in the cities, maybe certainly as sophisticated as New York or LA or Chicago. And a good joke should play anywhere, I think.
Is there any validity to critics who say that and I'm talking as a group now, with the shows like Caddyshack, Meatballs, and Stripes, your irreverent humor make sex and indolence acceptable to younger people? In other words, that you are presenting the wrong role models.
Well, right and wrong are tricky labels, I think, to apply. Sometimes it's the indolent person who's the real hero. I mean, I just grew up at a time when traditional heroes were crumbling, and they were replaced by the rebels. I think Americans particularly have a great love for rebels. The country was started by rebels, and the Marx Brothers were great symbols of anarchy and anti-establishment behavior. And Americans love an underdog, and they love the person who swims against the stream, the nonconformist. And I think that shows in our work. And especially when we choose institutions, Animal House, and with college and here with the Army, these are traditional enemies of free thought, in a way. I think it's really mainstream American comedy. I don't find it radical at all. And as far as being subversive, I don't think we lead our audience so much as echo what they already feel.
Which is interesting. Now, Woody Allen does a lot of that sort of satire in his humor, and lately he's been getting away from comedy. Do you want to get away from comedy? Are you thinking along lines of maybe I should get into some area now?
No, I think he's into the serious comedy that comes from an important psychological issue. I think comedy is as expressive as anything. It's a good way to make a good point if you make it well and intelligently, and I don't see a need to get away from it. I'm not bored with it yet, and I just tend to think that things are funny, that even at our worst moments, that there's something funny about it, like even when life plays terrible tricks on you, if you can see the humor in it, that maybe you're a little ahead of the game.
That's interesting. Do you actually see humor in situations when you yourself are faced with frustrations or even in some instances almost tragic moments? Can you?
Yeah, I'm just embarrassed by the self-indulgence of saying, why me, or everything is so terrible. Why not me? You know, someone's got to suffer. Also, my stage training at Second City, at Second City you're thrown onto a stage without a script in front of an audience. You don't know what you're going to do. So you actually live through that nightmare of being on stage and not knowing what's going on. And the audience knows you don't know what's going on. It's not funny. They're not laughing. And it's a kind of...
Cut it, I'm sorry, battery died.
Winch tape.
Claire, can we widen this and start on the 2 shots so we've got something to cover
Yes,
for you?
great.
Okay, if you just pick up again.
Now, weren't we talking about, you were talking about self-indulgence.
About whether life is funny or not, or whether there's comedy in tragedy. Yeah.
Yes, and how you got your experience. You couldn't take yourself seriously because you were on stage in Second City. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, when you're improvising in front of an audience and it's not going well, you experience these moments of pure, humiliating terror, and it's like a living nightmare. And somehow you survive it. It ends. You get off the stage. They take the lights. The lights go out, and it teaches you that you don't die from embarrassment. That there are worse things than being stripped naked in public. Things could always be worse. So it just you're able to perform 8 shows a week at Second City. So it's a tremendous amount of hardening that goes on. You really get tough in a certain way, and you learn to deal with failure and with the embarrassment of being on stage. So fortunately in my life I've had no great personal tragedies, but I would hope that I can maintain some irony and even in those situations.
I'd put my money on you for sure, but do you ever haven't you had anxieties or most of us have moments of extreme anxiety.
I got a great lesson from a psychology book. I read very little, but I try to make the most out of what I do read. And this book made a great point as a Gestalt therapy book, which means nothing. But the point was that it suggested that maybe a lot of our anxiety is really excitement, that when we feel what we read as fear going into a situation is just because we're physically excited. Our breath is short and we don't know what's going to happen. And that if you can treat it as excitement and not fear, it has a whole different color. It's the same feeling, but it's a positive experience and not a negative one. And I've tried to use that just to trust that in the moment you'll be able to figure out what to do. And in show business, I think it's probably essential to stay cool in that way.
Well, I just have, I know, 1 second, but I am curious about one thing. Did you have a very happy childhood?
No.
No.
I was a miserable, lonely teenager with glasses, worried about whether people liked me or not, just like everyone else. And would I be tall enough, and would I finish college, and would I get married, and all that stuff.
Would I make a living, and would
Yeah.
people like me? And isn't that wonderful? Because you turned out to do all the right things, and that should be encouraging for all our viewers. And I want to thank you very much. I've
pleasure.
really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Okay. Tommy whitened out for a 2-shot at the end, is that
Okay, that's very good. Yeah.